who don't know me, I'm director of the WSU Food Systems program, and I'm here today with my co-host Abba Kaiser, and we are super excited to be able to host this call weekly for all of you, and I know we'll have participants joining as we get started. So I'm just going to go through the first few slides today to talk about the outline for today, and remind all of you as you're joining the call to please mute your audio. So today's meeting, again, as we always do, I go through and give a brief overview of what the HUB is, the needs assessment tool. Today we have some wonderful guest speakers from WSU Youth and Families program. They're going to be talking about SnapEd resources, Jen Moss and Maggie Great. And then Abba is going to talk about Flower Hour, which is a virtual event that's happening tomorrow, as well as some other just virtual event updates, as well as launching of the International Quinoa Research Symposium, which is, I believe, going live today. And then last week, we talked a bit about supply chain disruption and food rescue, and Nils Johnson and Benji Astrachan are going to also share some of the information that they have about this, and we're hoping to really open it up to anyone on the call for any of these areas that we're going to be talking about today to share. And then at the end, we'll hopefully have some time just to share stories and updates as well. We have 2 hours scheduled for today, but we usually only use about an hour and a half. So, but we can go longer if need be. So I hope everyone's doing well, and we'll go ahead and get started. I just want to ask you all to introduce yourselves in the chat box, who you are, where you're located, and what you do. We also use this chat box to share resources throughout the call today, and we'll be then downloading this chat and making sure that those resources are linked up on our website. So we're really excited to welcome all of you, and again, share who you are in the chat box, introduce yourself, and if you have any resources that you want to share throughout the call today, please go ahead and put them in there as well. So the WSU Food Systems program, we are a multidisciplinary program that reaches across academic research and extension within WSU and also with external partners. We seek to work with communities throughout the state to foster viable farm businesses, optimize sustainable natural resource stewardship, and to promote scaled processing and distribution, always in the pursuit of access to healthy food for all. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen our seven focus areas, and that helps us really look at using a holistic approach across the food system and the work that we do and how it ties together and intersects across these various programs. The WSU Food Systems team collaborates on several different initiatives. We promote research, implement change, and provide educational opportunities for food and farm systems throughout the state. And this is just a network map of all the locations that we have within WSU. We're in all 39 counties. We're on the Colville tribe. We have multiple campuses, and I just want to also put a plug out for the Drive Wi-Fi program that was launched, I believe, yesterday. And so I believe there's 300 locations now across the state that have Wi-Fi available for you. There's been several partners that have come together, and I can put a resource about that in the link as well, and we'll make sure we post it on our website. So for those of you who are located in rural communities or areas that are underserved by broadband, you can go and use extension parking lots, campus parking lots. Oftentimes it's a partnership with a library or maybe a public utility where you can be able to get online and continue to engage virtually. So the purpose of the COVID-19 Hub is to provide a space to connect regularly with WSU and external partners working across the Washington food system, to collect and update COVID-19 resources to support the Washington food system, as well as to deploy our NAT, which is our needs assessment tool, and to provide time and space to share stories and receive support from one another. So our calendar of events, I encourage all of you to go and look at our calendar of events page. There's a lot of stuff coming up. I took this screenshot from last week, so some of these are outdated, but we've been trying really diligently to make sure that all of these incredible webinars and trainings that are coming out are being posted online. through our events calendar. And then Nicole and Tia have been working really hard to also post links to recorded webinars. So again, if you have something that's coming out that you want to make sure is being listed here, and you don't see it, please send it to us so we can post it on the COVID web on our events calendar. And then make sure you take the needs assessment. Even if you take it during this call, that would be great. There's a link for it right here. And we can also put a link in the chat box for you. It says for the April 19th through 25th, I grabbed this from last week, but we're actually looking for responses for this past week, which would have been the 26th through, I think it's the 2nd. So if you have not reported yet for that period of time, please do so either during this call or after the call. I'll be compiling a final report on Sunday, which we'll post on our website of that particular week. And it's been really useful for us to look at what is coming up as high need. You can see here, just looking at the data over the last couple of weeks, fiscal support is still being listed as one of the highest needs for food and farm businesses. We've talked about this almost every single week on our calls, about programs that are coming out, resources that are available, as well as the challenges as those resources dry up really rapidly. So again, it's an important resource. That information is being posted on our website, so you have access to that data. And then we're also sharing it with administrators at WSU and statewide leadership. And we're happy to also compile reports for you based on your county location or other criteria. Okay, so today we're going to start out talking about SnapEd resources, and I'm going to invite Jen Moss and Maggie Great to be able to provide an overview of this. And if you want me to share, I can stop sharing my screen, Jen and Maggie, if you want to share yours, or I can also pull up the website if that's easiest for you. Just let me know.
How about if I think Jen's going to start out with some description about SnapEd, but if I can share the screen, I'll bring up the website.
Great. So yeah, we were just going to share a little bit about the SnapEd program that we have across Washington State through Extension and also through other agencies that are working. So there's a broader SnapEd that happens across the state that may involve some programs that are subcontracted through the Department of Health and through Spokane Regional Health District on the other side of the mountains. But we do have SnapEd programs in most counties across the state operating either way. And then in my case, Acacia Zambrana and I are the regional implementing agency leads for Region 3, which is Snohomish, Whatcom, Skagit, Island, and San Juan counties. So our SnapEd program before COVID spent a lot of time working on direct education and policy systems and environmental changes within a variety of settings. We are required to work with audiences that are greater than 50% above the 200%. Anyway, low-income audiences, I'm not going to get into the details there. So when we have a qualified audience, we work with people in a variety of settings, including a lot of work in schools, but also a lot of work in community centers, food banks, community gardens, affordable housing sites, places, so people shopping, farmers markets, retail locations, different things like that. So since COVID-19, though, we've had to change how we are doing all of our programming across the state. We're working on identifying ways that we can do more virtual education. So we're trying to create some guidelines. Actually, Maggie and I are working on that as a part of our work group for guidelines for how that virtual education is going to look, how we can evaluate that virtual education, and where we can make sure that we're targeting that virtual education to a low-income audience and our SnapEd participants that we usually work with. So that's a big part of what we're doing now. We applied for, and unfortunately we're denied, a waiver to work in emergency food distribution as part of our SnapEd allowable activities. We're governed by a guidance that's released through USDA every year, and that guidance says that we cannot work in direct service of handing out the food and handing out meals or being involved at that level. We applied for a waiver because there is an opportunity to do that during extreme circumstances such as those that we're in, and we were denied the waiver. Our state DSHS lead is going to reapply in a more specific way, and so if that changes, we will let people know, because that would put us, give us the ability to be in a more frontline place in terms of food distribution during this time. But at this moment, we can't. What we can do, though, is leverage some of the relationships that we have with food banks and with schools and different places to continue to see if there is opportunities to connect local producers with the food distribution, so that we can help convene some of those connections and improve food access across the state. So part of our purpose of being here is to say, we're here, we have those relationships. We would really love if there's places that we can make those connections to connect with us. Beyond that, we're also just getting into our 3-year planning cycle. And so most of our programs across the state are busy writing their plans for what they're going to do in this next cycle of funding that starts in October 1. 2020 would be the beginning of this new 3-year plan. So if there are places that you can connect with your SnapEd folks, because we do work in systems, and we're moving our lives, our work and our focus away from only doing direct ed, but also trying to work in those systems. Make sure you get in touch with your local SnapEd person and see where some of those connections might fit. Beyond that, I'm gonna let Maggie talk about the websites.
Okay. So, hello everyone. This is a website that has recently been launched, and it's intended to help reach low-income families across the state, and provide information on how to shop on a budget, how to cook healthy meals and snacks, information on eating together as a family and why that is important, information on how to get out and move every day, and food resources, how to access some of the resources that are available in the state, and a host of different recipes. So I'll just spend a few minutes kind of going through the site and let you see what we have up here. Like I said, there's a section on plan, and people can navigate through it on their own fairly easy. I will say that this is a project that we work with Connors Communications, and they are the design people and the talent behind putting this website together. It's hosted over in Pullman. And so there's information on how to plan your meals, how to go about planning menus so that you can use your food dollars as wisely as possible, and then how to plan your shopping, and again with a focus on food resource management. There is a section on cooking, and one of the things that we think people are going to be interested in is some of these basic cooking skills. We got a lot of folks out there who didn't have the ability to go through home ec in high school, and now we've got young adults who we hear really don't know what some of the basic cooking tips skills are. A section on eat. I think I mentioned we've got information on the importance of eating together as a family and having family meals, eating with kids. So I'm going through this fairly quickly. I know that everyone, if they're interested, they can spend some time on their own looking at everything that's available. The move section is is something that's important to the SnapEd program. Several years ago, our guidance told us that we were not only to be putting up information about healthy food and how to prepare it, and but also with an emphasis on physical activity. And so this section of it provides people with where are the state parks, which supposedly are opening up again. And so if folks want to find a state park or a place to go for a hike or a walk, then they can plug in their address and their zip code, and it should give them some ideas. The same with trails, and we have a section on gardening, because as we know, that's part of physical activity. The food resource section, we actually moved it out so that it's a little more visible. It originally was under the Eat tab. And what this is, it would take people to links for a variety of different places that they might connect in with food resources across the state. We'll just scroll down. We recently added the WSDA food assistance map. So folks would have a variety of places to look for where they might get some help and some resources. And then we have recipes, and we're continually adding to the recipes. Right now we're trying to get some up that are plant-based proteins. We know that the latest shortage seems to be with meat, and so we're trying to get some recipes up here that again are plant-based, and we're going to continue to add to this section, and eventually we'll have a sorter tab here so people can go in and look for, you know, if they want breakfast recipes or snacks or dinner or whatever. I've had a couple of requests from folks, you know, like, are we going to produce anything that would help participants know about this site? And Connors Communications, they're working on some templates right now for a little kind of a half sheet recipe card kind of thing that gives one of the recipes and would point people to the site, and also a little bookmark that does the same. So hopefully those are going to be available soon. So this is our Live Well site. We hope that it's useful to folks as they're looking for food resources and information about how to make healthy choices. Feel free to distribute it far and wide. And if anybody has any questions, let us know.
Hey Maggie, were you not going to show the provider site where people could, or is there a way that people can find their local SnapEd provider easily?
Yes, I can show that. Okay, so we actually have two sites. The Live Well site is again targeted to those who are SnapEd eligible in the state. This one, we call it our provider site, and it's really it's a site for people who are implementing the SnapEd program. So in your local counties, you have folks who receive SnapEd funding, and that's what this site is targeted to. And in the world of SnapEd in the state of Washington, we're divided up into 5 regions. And region 1 is over in Spokane. It would take in Spokane, Okanagan, Chelan, Wenatchee, that area. Region 2 is down Walla Walla, the Tri-Cities, Yakima. Region 4 is primarily King and Pierce County. And region 5 is the Clark County and over into the peninsula. So if you wanted to see, for instance, in region 5, who the folks are that are receiving SnapEd money and doing work, then you could come here and you could see all the folks who are currently receiving SnapEd funding, and that they are doing programming in that local area. Jen, what else do you think we should say about this site?
I think that that's great. And I think there's also, I guess, to add on to some of the things that have changed since COVID started, was that a lot of our local programs, particularly our WSU programs, have started Facebook pages or become more active on their social media and their posting. And I think where we can help cross-post that and push some of that stuff out, it's very useful too. So if you can check in with your local SnapEd providers sites and things like that, there might be more information that's directed on local communities if it's a community you're working in.
This is Laura. I just have a quick question about if any of these resources are available in Spanish as well.
Yes, the Live Well site is in Spanish. Thank you. That's a very good question. I should have mentioned that. So there is a, you can select your language over here, and then it is translated into Spanish. It should come up here. Doesn't seem to, oh, there we go. And so, yes, it is available in Spanish.
That's great. And all the resources on the site are translated into Spanish?
Yes.
Perfect.
And in Region 3, we have a specialist that works as part of our SnapEd plan to help with Spanish outreach and also Spanish translation. And so we do have that as a resource that we can help with as well.
Right, and she has been helping us with some of the translation. We have it on a on Google Translator, and then she's going through and helping us to make sure that that translation is accurate.
I'd love to open it up for questions. You can ask questions in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask Maggie and Jen questions that you have about SnapEd in particular, the resources that they just went over, and anything else kind of about school nutrition programs that they might be able to answer.
This is Lizanne, and I just had a question on other languages. I noticed the other language bar at the top, but I couldn't see it. It was kind of small. Are there other languages, or will there be plans to go into other languages as well?
It's a good question, Lizanne. At this time, we don't have plans to translate it into further languages, but it's something that I think the SnapEd leadership will be discussing.
Great, thank you. We're seeing a high need for Russian type language.
I would say that the next language would be Russian.
I have a question here from Cheryl Weiser from Tilt Alliance, and she's asking if you can talk more about how the website was translated into Spanish and how long involved that process was.
Well, the folks over at Connors, they put in this plugin from Google Translator, and that process really didn't take all that long. It's my understanding that these kind of robotic translators, they are accurate to about somewhere between 86 and 90%. And so what the process that took us a little more time is then going back through it and making sure that the translation made sense. And I will also add that we have not only had Maria, who is the Spanish coordinator in Region 3, but we've also had a native Spanish speaker has also been helping with some of the translation. And going forward, Jen mentioned that we're writing our plans for the next 3 years. I'm going to be including some kind of funding in there so that I have a native Spanish speaker helping with the process. So I don't know. It's a roundabout way to answer your question. I mean, it does take a little bit of time, but it hasn't been a big challenge to us.
And for those of you who don't know, Connors Communications is part of the WSU College of Ag. So it's the resource provider that basically manages the site for SNAP. And it sounds like you might be able to do the same thing with Russian. So use a Google translator for Russian, have the site translated, and then again, find someone who can go through and just fine tune the site and make sure that it's appropriate.
Right, and of course, before I would do that, I would have to identify the person that could help us. So if anybody knows somebody who's a certified translator, let me know, please.
Yeah, if you have that information, you can post it in the chat box and we can definitely capture it. Any other questions for Jen or Maggie?
This is Abba. I just wanted to jump in. We've been in contact with Maria from Ruckelshaus Center, and I can post their info, but they are connected to a wide variety of translators that we're going to be working with for the International Quinoa Research Symposium, especially for Spanish speaking. So I can post their contact info as well.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think one thing too, Laura, I just thought of this after the conversation that we all had the other day. I think one thing to note is that SnapEd is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program education arm, and we're charged with educating about how to use SNAP benefits well. We are not as focused on educating people about SNAP specifically, but we do have some cross connection to the folks at DSHS that do administer the SNAP benefits. So we encourage participants to apply for and receive SNAP benefits as much as possible, but that's not what our focus is not trying to get people signed up for SNAP. It's about using those benefits well.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And I know when we were speaking the other day, I asked you about how often you get updates in terms of enrollments, and you said it's usually quarterly. And I'm wondering if they're going to change that in terms of during COVID to really look at how these benefits are being used and the number of people that are looking at accessing them. Do you have any additional information on that, or maybe anyone else on the call? Okay. Well, thank you so much. If you have questions throughout the call for Maggie or Jen, please go ahead and post them in the chat box and we'll capture those for you. And then I wanted to, Maggie, if you could stop sharing your screen, we'll go back to our next topic. Great, thank you. So now we're going to be talking a little bit about virtual meetings and updates. So before we get into talking a little bit more about supply chain disruption and food rescue, Abba's going to jump in here and talk about some of the work that she's been doing. We touched on this a little bit last week at the end of our meeting, and 2 weeks ago during the meeting, we talked about this quite a bit, especially knowing that TILT had just announced that they were going to move to a virtual meeting this year. You know, in terms of looking at the governor's phased approach to opening the economy and opening the state back up, there's still a lot of unknowns. And so I know at this point, most of the organizations that we work with are sort of a wait and see, but also for some of the long-term planning that we have around our events, needing to be able to move forward with some sort of framework. And so Abba's been doing quite a bit of work across the grain sector as program manager for WSU Food Systems. And so she's going to talk a little bit about some of that work, and we hope that we can have a lively conversation about that too if others on the call have information that they'd like to share or resources that they've currently found.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And I just want to also say thanks to Maggie and Jen for all your work. That website is amazingly robust and it looks like a lot of work to get together. So thank you for offering that. Sounds like it's a great tool for a lot of folks. I'm going to talk briefly about events. I'm curious to hear if anybody's had any kind of breakthroughs. be a little bit like Groundhog's Day, having the same conversation with event coordinators all over the country about not knowing what's going to happen or when we will know what's going to happen. One interesting article that I found, which I'll post in the chat box now, which is how to combat Zoom fatigue. Because one thing that I've also heard from an audio engineer friend of mine is that because Zoom doesn't give you all the information of a person's voice, your brain works twice as hard to hear and understand what people are saying and to take in information. And so that's why there's at the end of the Zoom day that's full of calls that you feel maybe twice as exhausted as you would with meetings in person. Not to mention the fact that we get so much just from the in-person experience. So, I think there's a lot of folks who are remaining hopeful, putting their events on the calendar, especially with the potential mitigation of 50-person events only. The way that we've addressed this, or at least in the immediate future, is to collaborate with our partners in the grain sector with the Portland Whole Grain Bakers Guild and the California Grain Campaign, who reached out to us with this idea within the regional grains work that we do to produce this flour hour, which is to talk about different lexicon within the grain world and within the flour world specifically. So we're really excited to be hosting that. You can still sign up if you want to. Basically, it's a simulcast of the same, we all have the same agenda, but we're going to be using different resource providers for our particular state. One of the very cool things that we also hope to replicate is that Katie Gorley created in Portland, just a Google document with resources for bakeries and CSAs that had add-on bakers as well. So we're going to try and continue to add and modify this document, which can be an open source for Washington state resources. So if you want to contribute to that, please get in touch with me. I'll put my email in the chat box as well. But this is a Saturday Zoom event that we're trying to keep very light and fun. More of a hangout with some of the experts in the field than an actual, class per se. And thinking about different ways to format these online interactions so that there's less burnout is a challenge. So we're going to be talking with Mel Darbyshire of the Grand Central Bakery, Catherine Curley of the Seattle Culinary Academy, and Julie Hammond, who's done a lot of work with the Bread Lab and other bakeries. They're launching a new bakery in collaboration with Starbucks, I believe, later this year. So we're excited about that, and we're also excited to compare notes with our partners in California and Oregon after the call and aggregate all of the information that we have to identify where the gaps are in the grain and flour lexicon. For example, what is heirloom? What is heritage? What is landrace? What does this all mean, and how do you use it actually with the resurgence of home baking with the with this pandemic happening? So that's Flour Hour, and we're really excited about that. Are there any questions or anybody, any shout outs or anything that we should be considering before we do this kind of experiment, tri-state experiment tomorrow?
I have a question, Abba.
Yeah.
This is Nils here. It looks like it's too late to register for this. Is that correct?
Technically, yes, but since you all are on this call, I feel like I can extend that to you all as a bonus. The registration is still open, so if you want to sign up for the call.
Okay, I have a client who I think might want to sign up.
Great. Yeah, I'll be checking.
Too, also.
Great. Yeah, I'll be checking until about 10 a.m. tomorrow for any other last minute stragglers. And Nils,
Thanks.
Connect with you about the resources that you have out on the east side for that shared Google Doc with the Portland Whole Grain Bakers as well.
Okay, great. Yep, thanks.
Cool. Great. Anyone else have any questions? Anyone else have any other tri-state or multiple state events that they're trying to host online right now or with other partners. I know we've been just kind of doing damage control at this point, but just curious if anybody's had any experience with that or has any tips or tricks or any other upcoming events that have that kind of same format that are consumer facing.
This is Erin calling from Tilth Alliance. I'm also curious to see if people have attended a virtual conference, and because I feel like right now I am imagining of a certain thing that is not super appealing. So I'm just curious if anybody has experience actually being an attendee of an event and what went well and what didn't. Yeah, as well.
Great question, Erin. Anyone have experience having attended a recent conference or sort of online, something more than a webinar that they've attended in the last 2 months? And you can also put something in the chat box as well if you don't want to speak up.
Erin, this is Abba again. I just had a phone call this week with Cornell, the Cornell plant breeding team that had to pivot really rapidly to host their online event, and got some really good information from them, which I'm happy to share, lessons learned. And I know we've been kind of circling around having a conversation with event coordinators, but especially within this deliverable, in this world where we're delivering specific education with agricultural initiatives, I think it's so specific that we could really learn a lot from each other. I'm seeing some comments here. Sounds like Maggie Great is getting ready to do some online trainings with 2 separate events. Jennifer says it was laborious to stay engaged. I think that's, to be expected. We're trying to like create some programming where people don't feel like they need to check their emails in the background, which, it's hard to do with all this going on. But yeah, I'd be happy to share their lessons learned. And even just if folks are interested, just schedule a call maybe in the summertime to have a more deep dive into like specific ways that we can, embrace the online event if that's the direction that we're going. Because I know a lot of folks are just kind of pivoting altogether and talking about putting their energy into other resources for this time.
Yeah, that'd be great, Abba. And thank you all for sharing your honest feedback about your experience. I'm going to be attending the Western Regional Center for the Advancement of Food Safety annual meeting, which was supposed to be held in person in New Mexico, but it's moved to an online format on Tuesday. And it initially was supposed to be 2 days and it's moved to 1 day. So I can report back next week how a full day of being on Zoom feels. So I can report back next Friday.
Great. And yeah, I love the comment that Henry just made too about breaking people out into rooms, doing polls, voting, just keeping people kind of alive and active and engaged. So that's something that we're also going to be looking at. I don't know if it's okay to share my screen, Laura.
Yeah, please do.
All right.
Just as a side note too, I know one of my sons is in Zoom every day for school, and they have started doing Zoom recess and breaking the kids up into random groups to have recess together into breakout rooms. And it's a side of what we're doing here, but it's been really interesting to see how that has changed their level of interaction. It's made it much more pleasant for them. So.
Nice. Yeah. So, for those of us who are trying to embrace the online nature of this time, I know that's not for everyone, and total respect, for whatever works for you and your organization. This is another initiative that has fully embraced the online format, which is the International Quinoa Research Symposium, which we're hosting as a bilingual program. So all of our materials are also offered in Spanish. We're going to be doing a combination of live and pre-recorded talks and field talks. We're thinking about using an integration with Slack to have more interaction communication throughout the day. It's free, which is great. In a lot of ways, this is a more accessible program than it would have been otherwise. We had the Fort Worden booked here in Port Townsend. But we're thinking about a 3-day program with 6-hour days, having interactive poster sessions, having keynotes, having a cooking channel that's going on, and having supplementary materials like a cool zine with different quinoa recipes and things that come out of this. So we're just trying to be creative, embrace it. We're in this very specific time. It's not going to last forever, but how can we make the most of what we have in this time without while being reasonable with ourselves and what we can accomplish. So this is our media, which is going to go out next week. So we hope that you all can sign up and attend and share. And I think that's all I have for now, unless there's any other questions about the symposium or virtual events in general.
I just wanted to have you also share, I know how challenging this has been, but also where you see some of the positives. I know that there's been some, in terms of like the event's now free, and the kind of material that we can bring forward. But also I loved talking about this the other day with you about having it be like a living event rather than something that just happens once, being able to sort of archive some of this work so people can continue to plug into it. And that seems like a sort of a new domain when we think about these virtual events, where we used to have in-person events and they had a start time and an end time and then it was gone, what that kind of means for the work you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and in some ways we are just going to be doing that sort of time capsule format. Another option is to think about it as this more of a living document that can be updated. I think that there are different platforms that would work better for that. But like folks will have access to the Slack channel or whatever kind of communication platforms we have after the fact to be able to continue to network and have those informal conversations. And I think that there is a huge opportunity to think about events as these networks and these information open source frameworks. Erin was talking last week about like sort of a Reddit for whatever we're doing, but like a specific Reddit for the event. So that it can be reflexive and responsive to the needs of the people involved. I'm happy to just share real quick a brief idea about our schedule, just in case folks are curious. We're thinking about an 8:30 start and having Q&As after each session where each of the speakers will be present from the previous session to answer different questions. We're thinking like, all right, folks can choose between 2 breakout rooms, and really we're just going to do 2 sessions in a row and then try and break it up with something like a workshop or something a little bit more interactive and engaging, and not do more than 6 hours in a day, because that's just sounds reasonable to us. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a sneak peek for the program. And I see a lot of people mentioning the Zoom breakout rooms. It's a really, really great feature as well. The only thing is that participants can't choose which room that they go into. So we're trying to figure that out with the Slack integration to see how people can kind of move in and out. And after talking with the Cornell folks, the feedback that I got was the simpler, the better. The less clicks, the better. If you can just have one room that people can come in and out of, that's the ideal situation. So we're trying to figure out a way to make it easy and fun, and definitely building in those breaks as well, and making it a little more playful, because I think that with some of these, the way that we're dealing with time now, it's like, if we're on the computer, we're working. And so it's a good time to figure out how to build in that levity to these programs as well, like you were saying with the recess. So I'm very open to other people's ideas. I'm excited to keep in touch with Cornell and other folks who are doing this very specific plant education and agricultural education work. And that's there's a lot of student-led organizations around the country that are also trying to figure this out, and a lot of kids who are super tech savvy, and I'm just trying to call all of them and figure out what they're doing so that we can at least make some options available for folks who are embracing this online format, which, you know, the next phase is sort of thinking about the reintegration and how, you know, if we're able to gather in groups of 50 or more, what that looks like, and having kind of contingency plans moving forward for that. So that's all I got. And if anybody wants to contact me, I'll put my address here again in the chat box. And if you want to be a part of that symposium event coordinator meeting sometime in the summer, I'd be happy to add you to that calendar invite as well. Please just get in touch with me.
Great, thank you so much, Ava. And again, if you have questions for her, Maggie, or Jen throughout this discussion today, please go ahead and still put those in the chat box. They'll capture them, and if they don't, we'll make sure that they get forwarded on. I really appreciate having some time just to talk about the challenge of all of the work that we do around convening people and what that looks like as we move forward. So for our next discussion topic today, we were going to talk a little bit about supply chain disruption and food rescue. I put a picture of potatoes up here because that seems to be what everyone has been talking about over the last 2 weeks. And I'm not sure if Benji has been able to join the call today. He's with Clallam County, and I know he had another call earlier who's going to try to jump on, but I know Nils is here. And I wanted to just put a shout out to anyone else who's been dealing with some food rescue around supply chain disruption to share your story, and also maybe where that you see opportunity or some significant challenge. So I was going to turn it over to Nils first. He, I know last Friday had a load of potatoes in the back of his car while he was attending the meeting. So let him talk a little bit about what he's been up to out in Northeast Washington. And again, if anyone else is on the call that wants to chime in, you can put your name in the chat box and we can call on you, or you can just unmute yourself.
Okay, hey, thanks, Laura. Yeah, so although the days are kind of running together now, but it seems like it was about 10 days ago at 6 p.m. I got a call from my extension director, Deborah Hansen, that our county commissioner in the south part of the county had gotten word from another county commissioner down from the Ritzville area, which is about 100 miles away, that there was going to be a giveaway of seed potatoes. And so I patched up the problems that I had with my farm truck, and by 11 o'clock that night, I was ready to make the trip. And I got up at 4:30 in the morning, made it down in a bit early for a 9 a.m. giveaway. It turns out that it was a Hutterite colony farm from somewhere down south in the Odessa area, who had decided rather than throwing their potatoes away that they would donate them. And they'd worked with a packer who donated their time and packaging materials. And they told me they did this because they wanted to understand the costs, but they washed and packed those seed potatoes, so they were already bagged in 15-pound bags. I had expected to receive bulk potatoes and took super sacks along with me, which are the large forkliftable totes that grain is often handled in. So I came home with 1,650 pounds of potatoes. That was two of their pallet loads of really beautiful russet potatoes, and we distributed those out through our regular farm to food pantry network. I think the last of them went out yesterday or the day before. Anyway, overall, it was pretty fast and furious. And then while we were delivering some of those potatoes to a food pantry on Monday, we met a gentleman who had gone to a local Hutterite farm here and collected a load of unwashed potatoes. They were meant to be seed potatoes in the back of his pickup, and he was delivering them. And so he gave me contact information there, and I went the following day in my truck and got two tote loads of potatoes, which are still currently in my shop. They're in beautiful shape, they're unwashed, and I ended up with 3,360 pounds of those potatoes. So the plan with those is to distribute those to any groups that might want to grow potatoes for the fall. I'm concerned that because of all this lack of production, all these seed potatoes that are not going into the ground, that we might end up with a shortage in the fall of potatoes, onions, and apples. And at this point, I've only focused on potatoes. And so I'm trying to get as much production for the fall of potatoes in our local area as we can. So I've been working with Pat Muntz from the Spokane Extension Office, and she's got a network of community gardens and church gardens. And I think they're going to take 500 pounds of these potatoes to plant. And I'm trying to work with our local master gardeners for planter row. And I'm going to be putting in some on my place, extra potatoes for the fall. And then whatever is left over that doesn't get planted, we'll bag those up and distribute those to food pantries. In particular, I was told by the fellow who runs the food pantry on the Spokane reservation that the potatoes we delivered to them earlier, they rebagged those into 7.5 pound bags, and they all went out right away. They were very popular. So he's got a bunch of bags, and he said it would work just fine if we just showed up with totes full, and we'll rebag those, and then they'll go out to his clients. We'll distribute them as best we can across the food pantry system. My extension director, Deborah Hansen, suggested that we set the expectation with these potatoes as we give them out. Since they're unwashed and untreated, that's an important aspect of these, is they are grocery store potatoes have sprays on them that prevent the eyes from sprouting, and also sprays to keep them from molding and that kind of thing. And so often you can't actually plant grocery store potatoes and have them grow, but these ones will in fact grow, and they'll start to sprout, which might be off-putting to people who aren't expecting that in their pantry. So anyway, the expectation we're trying to set is to plant 10% of them and eat 90% of them. And then each of those, well, one potato plant should yield something like 1 pound of potatoes. And each potato of the size these are can be planted into 3 plants, cut and planted into 3 plants. So each potato that gets planted could yield 3 pounds of potatoes. Deborah asked me to put together a couple of very simple videos, which I haven't done yet, but I might work on today, on how to plant potatoes in a garden setting and also in a pot setting. And I think I might also do a quick video on how to plant using a straw method, where you don't actually dig them in the ground. You just sort of cultivate the ground, set the potatoes on the top, and then cover them with hay or straw or whatever you have. They'll be very simple and straightforward. Pat Muntz from the Spokane Extension Office said that she could use those videos too. And anyway, that's what I've got going on right now. Who knows if I'll be able to accomplish all of it amongst everything else, but that's the plan anyway.
And it sounds like most of it's been word of mouth. It sounds like there aren't a lot of formal channels of communication right now about excess supply. So you heard about this.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I do now have the contact information for the guy who's in charge of potatoes at our local Hutterite farm, which is towards Reardon. It's still a distance to go, but not too far. In fact, I drive right by it during my farm to community projects. So I'm looking forward to, in the future, when things get back to normal, presuming whatever that new normal is, that I'll have that contact information, have access to potatoes if we need them. But yes, absolutely. The event that was in Reardon was very short notice. And when I arrived there, I arrived early because I had a flat tire on my truck and I was afraid it was going to lose air along the way. And so I had to leave a little extra time in case I had to deal with that. But that got me there in time to meet some of the players that were there before the giveaway. And the local Senate representative was there, and the local legislative representative was there, as well as the county commissioner who I'd talked to in the first place. So all the local officials understand the problem. They talked a lot about onions too, and I haven't had a chance to capitalize on that yet, but because I don't have a contact information for the onion growers down there in the Othello region. That may still come, but you're right. It's entirely informal. A good place to start might be with your county commissioners because they talk with other county commissioners.
Great, thanks, Nils. Do we have, is Benji, I don't know if he's been able to join us yet or not. If he is, that's great, and he can chime in and talk to us about a little bit of what's going on the Olympic Peninsula. But otherwise, I'd also love to hear if anyone else has any stories like this of what Nils has been doing over the last couple of weeks, or they've at least heard about excess food within the supply chain that is either going to go to waste or isn't being distributed.
I have one more comment unrelated to potatoes, if that's okay, Laura. So I've got a pork farm to food pantry project planned for this season, funded by Northwest Harvest. It's just a small project, 12 hogs total. And it turns out that there is a huge shortage of piglets available because everybody is concerned about pork in the fall. I've got a phone number just yesterday that I plan to call right after this call of a gentleman who is driving out to the Midwest and picking up piglets by the thousand to bring back to the West. These are piglets which are scheduled to be euthanized in the Midwest because there's no market for them, and he's reselling them here in the West where there's a shortage. So again, word of mouth, but there's this kind of larger issue with meat that is just emerging, I think. And I noticed in our local grocery stores that there's a package limit that they're limiting the number of packages that people can buy of all different types of meat because they have a shortage of supply.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I know that we are convening a meeting next week specifically about meat based on the call that we had last week. So we're really hoping to dive a little bit deeper into some of these challenges right now. And one of the things that we're also putting together, and I know King County has already put together a really comprehensive list of USDA inspected slaughter sites in the state. A couple of years ago, so updating that and then looking at where we also have a WSDA custom slaughter available. But I know even on the peninsula, all of the meat is sold out for many, many months. So the meat that farmers had is sold, as well as everything that all the animals that they have are spoken for in terms of custom orders, really through the end of this year. So, and I know a lot of people are seeing, particularly in grocery stores, limits on purchasing of meat. Maggie and Jen talked a little bit about that, looking at plant-based protein diets and menus specifically to address some of those shortages. So I do think it's going to be something that we're all going to be focused on in the months to come, looking at some of those shortages and where we have disruption in processing in particular. So I know, Nils, we talked a little bit about this on a prior call where you were able to get an exemption from the health department in your county to be able to do custom slaughter for the pork that's going to be going into the food bank. And I think that's also a model, an innovative model that we'd like to talk a little bit more about on these calls as we move forward.
If this contact number I have turns out to be useful for this gentleman that I've heard is hauling pigs from the Midwest, I'll share it through you, Laura, so that other people can contact him.
Great, thank you. And I see here that Jude asked if the WSDA survey of producers includes questions about supply chain issues. And I haven't taken the survey that went out. It was particularly focused on food and farm businesses and producers, but if there's anyone from the WSDA on the call who could maybe share some information specifically about the survey and whether it addresses supply chain disruption, that would be great.
This is Laura Raymond, and I with WSDA, and I actually need to jump off at this very moment to go attend another meeting, but there are some questions in that survey about that. there is not an in-depth line of questioning about supply chain disruptions, but there are many questions about impacts that producers are feeling, which include questions about access to processing and access to inputs. And there are quite a few open-ended questions where people can include comments, and we're looking at those narrative responses as well.
Great,
and please
you.
do encourage producers to fill that out. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for joining, Laura, and I'm sorry you have to go. But again, thank you so much for participating. And I know talking to you earlier, you mentioned that there was a lot of calls coming in about excess food and particularly potatoes. So to the WSDA. So maybe, you know, that's something that we can try to drill into a little bit more on our next call is, you know, how to create some sort of network or a channel in which people could particularly report out whether they have surplus that they're not able to market, and what that looks like. And I don't know if there's anyone on the call specifically from Northwest Harvest, Second Harvest, or Food Lifeline, or any of the other food banks or food pantries in the state that have had similar experiences or information that's come in, particularly about food rescue opportunities. I guess not. So we'll go ahead and move forward. Really our last topic of the day today was just really a open discussion and time to share. So I'd love if there's anything that you wanted to hear today that you didn't hear, specific topics for next week that you really want us to focus on, you can go ahead and speak up now, or you can put those in the chat box. If you have just a lighthearted story that you want to share about your week, or something that was really challenging that you'd like to share with the group as well, please feel free. This is just some time for us to be able to come together as a community and support one another.
Hi, Laura. I wanted to do a quick share if I could, but
please do, Henry.
So this is Henry Wong with Business Impact Northwest. We provide technical assistance and lending to underserved communities. And one thing we're getting a lot of questions for now in regards to some of the relief loans and grants is with the PPP. Specifically, okay, if you've applied for the PPP, now what do you need to do to make sure you get that forgiveness on that piece? So I'm going to post webinar, part 1 of a webinar that we're going to do next week, where we'll start to talk about some of that.
Great, thank you. And and I know Laura Raymond from the WSDA brought this up maybe 2 weeks ago, some of the bookkeeping or record keeping that needs to take place to be able to qualify, and really wanting to let food and farm businesses know to kind of get their books in order from January 1 moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah, those would be the things that we'll start to cover, and then we'll have one of our some of the information we're still trying to figure out. So we're going to definitely have a part 2 as new information comes out. So we'll have one of our senior loan officers on this call next week, or on the webinar posted.
Okay, great.
And that's exactly the types of things, like what kind of records to keep and what do you have to do to make sure that whenever that check happens, those loans are forgiven.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in? I see here a group of us coordinated a King County farmer call last week and then been brainstorming the best ways. This is from Courtney from AFT. Do you want to share this, Courtney?
Hi, sure. So last week, PCC Farmland Trust and King Conservation District, King County, WSU, there were a lot of partners at the table with the Farm King County team coordinated a King County farmer call, and it was it was really modeled after the Washington Young Farmers calls and the Pierce County calls, but we had 63 people call in, and about 25 were farmers, and we highlighted farmer voices over service providers, just had service providers call in and listen, and received a lot of positive feedback from it. And so in talking with some people at my organization, there was interest in if there's interest in other counties, AFT could partner. What the King County team really identified is that it takes a team. There's really no way that only 2 people can coordinate a county call, but if there was a couple people that were interested, they can email me. And then I guess just another bit of good news is that AFT, unrelated to the county call, AFT has been taking applications for a farmer relief fund, and recently gave $1,000, which is a small amount, but something, to 1,000 farmers across the country. And 57 of those applicants were in Washington. So
That's
all
great.
across the state, which is really exciting. And we're looking forward to sharing those stories.
That's excellent. And I wonder if maybe even, and I can talk to you about this offline, maybe through email, but it would be interesting maybe next week to even have some time set aside to talk specifically about that King County call, and see if we have some of our county coordinators on the call, if they would be interested. We can also do that offline, but it would be really nice to hear about some of those producer facing opportunities to help support farm businesses, and also, I guess, hear back too about some of those needs to this group, like some reporting back, so that we have producers often on the call, but also a lot of service providers and resources. So understanding where we should also be looking at optimizing the resources that we have.
Yeah, I'm absolutely interested. Jordan also just posted, she's been doing Pierce County calls, so there's probably an opportunity there for us all to talk and offer information.
Great.
Thanks.
Excellent. Perfect. Maybe I'll reach out to you and Jordan, maybe for next week's call or the week after. So, and I also see Jordan posted about a second call featuring Congresswoman Schreier for about a 45-minute Q&A. She said it was fantastic, great to connect with her, with farmers and vice versa. Folks appreciated it. And so, yeah, just any way that we can also, excuse me, hear about those sessions as service for providers as well, and resources, so that we can look at what we could be doing a lot better. So I really appreciate all this work that's happening across the state. Anyone else want to jump in?
Hi, Laura. This is Nils again. Hey, I just posted through the chat the contact information for Brandy Tucker, who is from the Washington Potato Commission. And so for anybody who's looking for potatoes, she'd be a good person to contact. Unfortunately, I'm working from my phone here, and I'm getting used to how it all works. And so my post to everyone came in 2 different pieces and is separated by several other comments. So the 2 posts are meant to go together, but I hit return.
No problem,
accident.
Nils. Thank you. I know we had quite a few people jump off because there's a county director's call right now, as well as some other WSU calls. So I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes if people want to share. I also just want to make an announcement for next week. We're meeting on the 15th from 10 to 12. You'll see the needs assessment come out on Wednesdays. Please take that. If you haven't already taken it, please send it out to your networks. It's meant for anyone across the food system to be able to take. We have several different categories that people can select from in terms of their role within the food system. And we're really hoping to up those numbers every single week, so we can not only see what are emerging needs across the food system, but we can also use it as a way to understand the effect of COVID and where we really have holes in our food system, and how to really help support a more resilient food system as we move forward, particularly in terms of emergency management planning around these kinds of events. So we're really hoping that it will help us in many ways. Again, continue to send us your calendar events and links. And I just want to thank all of you for participating. I know it's a lot of time out of a day, and it's a long Zoom call, but we really appreciate being able to connect with all of you and share stories, share resources, highlight what you're all doing across the state to make the Washington food system viable and resilient for all of us. So I just want to appreciate all of your time today. And again, if there's anything else that you want to share, please go ahead and do so. Abba and I will stay on for a few minutes before we stop the meeting. And then we'll be downloading the recording, which will go up on our website sometime probably today, and then also capturing all of the information in the chat box. Jordan, thanks for sending out those notes as well. Appreciate it. Well, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. I hope you get to enjoy some of the sunshine, maybe out in your garden or doing something fun. I went and jumped in the Puget Sound yesterday. It was so nice. So hoping to be able to do that more often as the days get warmer and longer.
Laura, hi, my name is Carrie and I'm with King Conservation District. I'm the new-ish farm program manager.
Great, welcome.
Thank you, thanks. I know there's still quite a few people on the call, so I don't want to hold them up from going to their next meeting, but I did want to bend your ear and Abba's ear about an idea. Would now be a good time to do that?
Yeah,
or should
sure,
we wait
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
King Conservation District we've received direction from the board that because a lot of our cooperators that are farmers and producers aren't the most technologically savvy folks. Like there's a constituency that certainly is and is on Instagram and knows how to use Zoom. And then there's this whole other group of folks that we work with that don't and aren't that savvy. And so the board has asked if the farm team could put together a tool, a service, if you will, where we reach out to those less technologically savvy people or the people that don't have time to pore over WSU's website, farmkingcounty.org, Washington Young Farmers website. And so I wanted to talk to you if you thought that there would be a need for this, or do you feel like that most people have the time to keep up with all the information that changes so rapidly?
I don't think anyone has time to keep up with all the information. I think it would be great if there was a distilled way to highlight some of those specific skills and really the sort of entry point for people that may be unfamiliar with some of this technology. They may not even have the right kind of device to use. And so I think that, yeah, it would be really, really valuable, especially if it was in a webinar format and even something that could be translated. We've talked a lot on these calls about the lack of information to help Spanish-speaking farmers pivot into online platforms. But then also, I don't want to be biased towards older farmers, but also generationally, some of the farmers that may not be as familiar with technology as their younger cohorts as well. So I think that it's definitely a need. And I know one of the things that we've been talking about quite a bit is how do we also support mentoring between farmers that are really tech savvy to be able to mentor those who aren't. And so I don't know if there's an opportunity for that within King Conservation District, but we had that we had a discussion of that a few weeks ago on this call, and there was a little bit of follow up, but you know, there's obviously a need for some funding to be able to compensate a farmer mentor.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So we were thinking less webinar-ish and more personal relationship, because we have a personal relationship with some of these people. And so especially with our beef producers and our dairy folks, that's more like a phone call and a conversation, right?
I think that's great.
Did you know that this pot of money is getting ready to expire, and here's where you can learn about it? And, you know, everything from not just financial resources, but also mental health and just all the different buckets in terms of health and safety and little things from where to find hand sanitizer. And so Abba, do you think that there would be a need for this really sort of intimate personal service where because we do have these long-standing relationships with these folks, and they've had farm planners for, years now. So it wouldn't be out of character to make that phone call and say, hey, is there something that we can help you with?
Sure, absolutely.
Financial or health-wise, or, we don't want to do anything that anyone else is doing, but it's like there are these amazing tools out there, but like you said, Laura, they're not distilled down, and a lot of our folks, some of them don't even know what Google is. So just sending them to this website or that website, it's like some of these folks just really need their hand held a little closer.
It kind of be like the new world of the farm plan. Conservation districts are so instrumental in helping people pull together their farm plan, and maybe this could be sort of a that add-on.
Okay, and then
hey, Abba, I know you wanted to say something too.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. A couple thoughts come to mind. One is that in terms of an accessibility piece, I don't know if video would be helpful. Like, I think the one-on-one reach outs and that kind of networking and communication can work really, really well and be really effective. I've also seen it be really effective with mental health communities in our area. It's called NAMI. And they, I know there's like coordinators in each county that are making phone calls specifically to each person who they have in their database, just to say, hey, what do you need? A lot of these folks are in their home. They need medication picked up. They can't go to the pharmacy, things like that, like basic things like, how are you doing? And then they connect them with the people that they need. So that might be something to look at as an organization that's already involved in that work as well.
Yeah.
So and then the other thing from the accessibility standpoint is, I don't know if like a YouTube video would be helpful for these folks, and just having like standing links to like how to download Zoom,
we have another team working on that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
This is more personalized, like, because a lot of times you're not going to get this information out of them. You're going to have to say things like, should you need information about how to defer your mortgage payment? And they'll go, oh, well, you might just send me that just in case, or tell me how I might make that work.
Right.
So there's a little bit of phishing involved, and it's a highly personal service that we would be providing, because we do have relationships with these folks.
Totally.
So
it sounds like you have a scope too, like within your county, within these specific relationships, which is also really helpful.
Yeah. So I love the idea of a webinar later, but for this initial, how can I help you, your dairy, your family, right?
Right.
And it would be great once these kind of resources start to kind of get developed, or even sort of scripts, where it's like you have different kind of phone scripts based on the needs. That could be, having 45 conservation districts in the state, starting within King County, or King Conservation District, but there may be like this incredible opportunity. And I've talked a little bit with Allison Halpern about this, like how could we come up with a joint communication plan that goes out to like county extension offices, but also conservation districts, about some of the resources out there. And maybe there's an opportunity, you're doing this in King, but maybe some of your counterparts around the state are also finding that this is a huge need. And there could be a great way to kind of market that and communicate that out as a resource that the conservation districts are willing to offer.
And I'm wondering too, if anybody else has any thoughts on the call, because I know that other people are working on this as well and probably having similar conversations. So I just want to mention that it's just 8 of us now. We can have a more intimate conversation if you want, but sorry to interrupt you, Carrie.
No, I'd love to hear what Nils has to say, and if he thinks that we would be stepping out of our bounds, or because we do have this kind of personal relationship, would that, because my biggest fear is that we get on the backside of this, and instead of 20 dairies left in King County, we only have 10. And it's like, our whole purpose is to work with cooperators, but if they can't survive this, then
Yeah, I think I think Nils has had to jump off, but you're right. It's a much more holistic framework that we're trying to envision here, because if they can't access basic services and navigate these, loans, or, even what Henry was posting about the loan forgiveness program, like that's information that needs to be way more accessible. And yeah, I'm
Okay.
curious to hear.
Can I send you guys a PowerPoint proposal that I just had to give to recruit my team for this?
Sure, if you want to send it in the
Definitely.
chat box, there's an option to upload a file.
Oh, okay. I learn something new every day.
Yeah, you can do it that way, or you can send it directly to us, either way.
Okay. And then Courtney mentioned the farmer phone call that we had last Thursday. And the day of, we had so many dairy producers and beef guys like, what is Zoom? How do I get an account? Can I just call in on my phone? I'm on my tractor. So there's just this huge divide between, so I love your idea about the mentor program, and now might not be the best time because folks are trying to get their fields ready and they're really busy, but at some point I would love to take a deeper dive with that with you guys, gals.
Yeah, sure. I have to, just, you can send me an email and we can just set up a meeting in the next week.
Okay, let me upload this file real quick, because I won't have like Patricia's email. Let's see, Abba, how do you do that in the chat?
So on the bottom right, you see that blue icon at the bottom where it says to, and then you can choose
everyone. Yep.
Desktop. And mind you, this was put together for KCD employees, so that it's not ready to like float to the public yet, but
So I just took a screenshot of what my chat box looks like, and I'm sending it to you. So in the bottom right of my chat box, there's a little icon that says file.
okay.
You did it.
Yay, thank you.
Definitely.
You're my technology mentor now.
Well, don't worry, it'll change on us as soon as we get the hang of it anyway, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well,
Thanks,
thank
Carrie,
you
for
guys.
speaking up. Yeah, definitely. It was great to hear from you.
And thanks for helping me get the confidence, because it's like, this is, yeah. We don't want to be overloaded with phone calls right now, but because of, but then it's also like, there's this small group of people that are really struggling and just don't have the technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And we just can't let pride get in the way right now. So if some of this stuff can be resolved with a phone call and just like a personal touch, then we can totally do that.
Absolutely.
Great.
So.
I wanted to say hi. This is Marissa from Sustainable Connections. Carrie, I just want to say thanks for bringing that up and sharing. I think the more we talk about this need, the more we can create something that might work. But I think it really is going to rely heavily on our very localized groups that have those relationships. And so thank you again for bringing it up. And I just wanted to reinforce that. Like, I believe it's a need. It's heavy on my heart. I participated in a call last week with some Skagit farmers. Suicide issues came up a lot. Composting animals came up a lot. You know, there's a lot of heavy things that I think you're very aware people aren't necessarily reaching out. Maybe because they don't know that it's a possibility that we could have a mentor to help them with tech. So yeah, I don't have anything really to add other than I believe there's a big need.
Okay, well,
Marissa.
thank you.
Yeah.
As we develop this service, if you will, with all you guys' tools, because we're not going to recreate the wheel or the buckets. They've already been uniquely identified. Now we just need to compile everything. So I will share it back with you guys so that you can help us. Maybe you could even find some farmers that we could practice on before we go live.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds, I love it. And
Yeah,
I think spending a little bit more time with this in the next week or two on our calls too, because I know it's like Marissa was saying, it's a problem across the state. And how do we help empower the local resource providers that have those relationships to be able to support this work?
and I just posted a link in the chat that is for the NAMI Jefferson County, that are the folks that I know personally who are making phone calls. And I know that they're really open to talking about their process and just how they've organized and what their script is, because they've been making those personal calls, and it might be a model just to kind of look at and copy and paste too, and just even knowing how to frame questions, or what other kinds of resources that people might be needing. So just in terms of not recreating the wheel again, they might be a good resource, and I know that they are available by phone as well. So
Perfect.
if that's helpful for you, Carrie.
I will copy this into my mental health bucket right now so that I have that tool for that bucket. And then I don't know if you were at the Focus to Farming conference last year, but the keynote speaker, Dr. Michael Rosman, had he's a farmer in Iowa, and then he's also a psychologist, and he started a 24-hour 1-800 hotline for people that were really struggling. So that's another tool in that bucket. So I'll share the different buckets with you guys once the team gets them compiled down. And then if we've missed something, I would love it if you could add to our bucket.
Sure. Sounds good. And then reach out if you want to schedule a meeting as well. I'm happy to jump on a call with you next week.
Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Yay. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.